Hey, hi everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Casey Ruggiero with the California Transportation Commission, and I'm the program manager of the State Transportation Improvement Program, which I'll refer to as the STIP moving forward. Before we begin, I'm going to pass it over to Keith Duncan and his team for introductions. Go ahead, Keith.
Thank you, Casey. Good afternoon. Happy Wednesday. My name is Keith Duncan with the Caltrans Division of Budgets. I'm also joined today by Garrett Franklin. He is our office chief over our capital and finance, as well as Matt Ruggiero, who is our Caltrans fund estimate manager, both online, and will be participating on the STIP fund estimate overview. Thank you, Casey.
Thanks, Keith. Okay, so before we get started, I'm going to have Alika go over how you can participate in today's discussion. Alika, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Thanks, Casey. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. The CTC exists to make transportation planning, funding, and policy more understandable and accountable. Our workshops take place in diverse locations around the state so that commission staff can hear directly from our stakeholders around California. The workshop agenda is located on our website. There is live closed captioning available for this webinar. Please select the Show Captions tab at the bottom of your screen. There are a number of language options available there for you to choose from. Any document that the CTC creates can be translated into any language as you need. Simply email us at ctc@catc.ca.gov and we will have them returned to you as quickly as possible. For all of our workshops, we encourage interaction with our stakeholders. There will be opportunity for questions and comments throughout this workshop. For those of you attending on Zoom, you should see the webinar control panel likely located at the bottom of your screen. There you will find the raised hand and Q&A tabs. We encourage you to raise your hand as soon as we reach the item to give the system, time to acknowledge you. Commission staff will let you know when it's your turn to make your comment. Alternately, you may also use the Q&A tab to submit your comment or question. Commission staff will read that on your behalf. As a reminder, each registered attendee is provided a unique link or phone number to access this webinar. These should not be shared with other participants as this can create confusion for staff when you're making your comments. Please do your best to be concise and please make sure that your comments are adding new information. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you have any sort of technical issues throughout this webinar, please reach out to me through the Q&A tab. Thank you.
Thank you, Alika. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to Keith Duncan and the Caltrans team to begin the presentation on the 2024 draft STIP fund estimate.
Well, thank you, Casey. And again, good afternoon. Happy Wednesday, everybody. This presentation today is part of the STIP workshop, is a continuation of the public process we started back in January at the commission meeting, presenting an overview, continued forward to the sharing of the draft and finalizing of the fund estimate assumptions, as well as the presentation of the draft fund estimate back in June. Also included participation in an ITIP workshop kickoff meeting back in March. Throughout the period, just a lot of information sharing, and each subsequent meeting we've participated in, we continue to provide updates. And today is no different. Since the last update that we shared, which was the draft fund estimate back in June, we've had the passage of the enacted budget. Included in that enacted budget was provisions or funding set aside to support and assist in the transit fiscal cliff that I know we are all well aware of throughout the state. Included in the enacted budget is roughly $190 million directly from the public transportation account, the PTA. I do bring that up specifically because, as many of us are well aware, over the last couple STIP cycles, both the 2020 and the 2022, there was limited or no PTA funds available for those prior fund estimates or for those prior cycles. Thankfully, as part of this fund estimate development process, we were able to identify that there was some available funds And with this redirection for the transit fiscal cliff operations, it does impact a little bit, but there is still some PTA funding available. So that is a win we see as for all of us involved. So today we do have the opportunity to share with you a couple of our subject matter experts within our Caltrans division of budgets, both Garrett Franklin and Matt Ruggiero. Both of them have been participant in, been researched, and been part of a lot of the fund estimate development process over the last several cycles. They've dealt with both the passage of Senate Bill 1 back in 17 and 18, the pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, as well as the passage of both the FAST Act as well as the most recent Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act. I bring those up because obviously federal funds do play an important role in both the STIP and the SHOP fund estimates. We do have a series of slides, a continuation of that information sharing today. And at the end of the slides, we have a section for questions. So we'll definitely open it up to anybody that may have questions. But with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Garrett and Matt to get into the details. It's all yours, gentlemen.
Matt, you're muted.
Oops. Oh, sorry about that. Are we able to get to the next slide?
Yeah, I'm managing the slide, so just let me know if you when you want me to move to the next.
Okay. So here we have an explanation of the fund estimate methodology. We started with the beginning balance, and that's as of the 23-24 fiscal year. And then we add to that the anticipated state and federal revenues. From that, we deduct the non-program commitments, and that the maintenance, ongoing operations, support, etc. And then we have our existing program commitments, and we deduct those through a cash flow model. And then that provides us with the resources around programming within those 5 years. Next slide. Thank you. So this is a 25-year look at California's gasoline consumption. As you see, this graph is kind of cool. It kind of shows you the year-over-year percentage change. You can see that there's kind of two big notable hits in consumption. One was in the early 2000s during that recession, and the second one was during the COVID-19 pandemic. On the far right, you can see our forecasted fund estimate period gasoline consumption trends. As you can see, year after year, it goes down approximately 1.9%. And the reason for this is mostly caused by zero emission vehicles, more fuel efficient vehicles on the road. So this graph displays the gross gasoline excise tax revenues. As you can see, even with the forecasted decrease in gasoline consumption over the fund estimate period, we're still seeing a steady increase in gasoline revenues. The reason for this is that the inflationary component of the gasoline excise taxes, which we expect to increase about 3.1%, outpacing that annual decrease in consumption. And that's why we're seeing this steady, slow but steady increase in gross gasoline excise tax. Next slide, please.
Matt, do you mind speaking up just a tad bit louder? I think you're cutting in and out on this end.
Sure.
And did I switch the slide? I think this one? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so this bar graph displays the primary revenue sources for the STIP and SHOP. It's broken down into the federal obligation authority, the base excise tax for both gasoline and diesel, and then we have our various SB1 revenues, and finally the incremental excise tax revenue. And what you can see, what this bar graph displays is just year over year. While it's not big, and in a year-over-year increase in revenues for both of these programs. Next slide, please. All right. Okay, so this graph is displaying the the Federal Obligation Authority, when we're comparing the 2024 fund estimate to the 2022 fund estimate, you'll notice this large increase, and that's due to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the passage of that. And this provided an additional about 35% more in federal revenue from the previous FAST Act. And because of this increase in federal funds, we have an increase in capacity this cycle. Next slide. Okay, I'll hand it over to Garrett. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. So what I wanted to do is share a little bit more information about the public transportation account in particular. And I'll start out by kind of giving something similar to what Matt prepared for the fund estimate in general, just kind of a overarching explanation of how the capacity is determined. And then I'll share a little bit more information about the cycle over cycle difference between 22 and the 24 fund estimate cycle. So the annual resources primarily are diesel sales tax and the transportation improvement fee that comes into the public transportation account. And from there, statute basically mandates a series of set-asides. And so the bulk of that revenue is ultimately provided for state transit assistance, but there's also resources for transit and intercity rail capital program, as well as state rail assistance. And so from that, approximately 22% of the diesel sales tax annually is available for the state. And from that, there's the kind of ongoing operations and support, local assistance, as well as the existing rail and mass transportation commitments. And what kind of falls out of the bottom of that equation is what is used to determine capacity for the STIP in particular. Next slide, please. And so kind of what I alluded to a minute ago, we're seeing an increase in the diesel sales tax revenue for this 2024 cycle that is ultimately available for the state. The blue line represents the 2022 fund estimate, whereas the orange is for the 2024 cycle. And the reason that's really pushing this is the projected price at the pump for a gallon of diesel fuel. So unlike the excise tax that Matt had referenced before, the sales tax that comes into the public transportation account is due in part to the actual sale price of the fuel, as well as the number of gallons that are purchased. So in 2021, the average price was $3.56. Fast forward to fiscal year 22-23, and that value is up to $5.71, which corresponds to about a 61% increase. So that's kind of the lever or the mechanism for the increase for the cycle. Next slide, please. And so Keith alluded to earlier that there was a more recent reduction to the public transportation account capacity due to the transit fiscal cliff. That is incorporated into this table right here. So starting out with SHOP, you see that there's primarily the state highway account and RMRA resources that kind of net out to a $25.8 billion program over the 5-year fund estimate cycle. And after accounting for the 2022 program, it's about $16.9 billion in new capacity over those 5 years. For STIP in particular, that's going to be around the middle of the slide, 2 lines down, the public transportation account program capacity. In these outer years, it's a slight reduction from what was included in the June commission meeting to incorporate that $190 million that's going to be for that new program and for that fiscal cliff. So over the 5-year fund estimate period, it's that line directly below it that's in bold, $2.86 billion. And after accounting for the existing program, it's about $1.7 billion in new capacity. Thanks, Casey. Next slide. So just as a quick comparison to the prior fund estimate cycle for STIP in particular, capacity is 2.9 billion, which represents an approximately $770 million increase from the last cycle. It's primarily due to the diesel sales tax revenue that I shared earlier, and the incremental excise tax that's earmarked for STIP in particular. The excise tax rate is actually increasing in to offset the consumption declines over time. And what's really important to note for both STIP and for SHOP is that the capacity can be impacted by the 23-24 budget and associated legislation that may come out after the budget, which obviously was signed for July 1st. For the SHOP capacity, it's 25.8 billion, and it's an increase of 5 billion, mostly due to what Matt had referenced earlier, IIJA, as well as the excise tax rates outpacing the decline in consumption in the near term. Next slide, please. And then just a quick rundown of the aeronautics account. Although it's not technically a portion or a component of the STIP fund estimate, it's prepared in concert. And assuming the full $1.5 million annually for the credit program, and also assuming a $2.5 million local airport loan account transfer into the aeronautics account, the capacity over the 5-year period for aeronautics is currently $7 million. And this sub-bullet is just to say that it is in part contingent upon the $2.5 million that comes from the local airport loan account. Next slide. And with that, I'll go ahead and I'll turn it back to Keith for final thoughts.
Thank you, Garrett. And just looking ahead to next steps, it's been no surprise since each of the presentations we've shared at commission meetings. As part of the CTC workshop or the STIP workshop today, we'll continue to work with CTC staff, as well as evaluate if there's any additional supplemental or trailer bills that may be enacted between now and over the next couple of weeks. We'll continue to just update any 2024 fund estimate numbers or assumptions as needed. And then looking ahead, we do plan to present the final 2024 fund estimates for adoption to the commission meeting on August 16th. And we always do caveat one of the options that the commission does retain is it could delay adoption of the fund estimate by up to 90 days if there's a driving need. Based on recent information, we've been able to provide updates regarding all assumptions. We're not aware of any pending major items that could impact the fund estimate, but over the next couple of weeks, if something does come up that does, we can work with commission, and they do retain that opportunity to delay adoption. But the plan moving forward is to present the final fund estimate in August so we can get it adopted. As we know, both the STIP and the SHOP, getting those next cycles, getting those programs established is contingent upon getting this fund estimate adopted. Next slide, please. And with that, I'll go ahead and I know we have we still have to go over the STIP guidelines with Casey and the CTC team, but we're willing to take any questions that anyone may have related specifically to the fund estimate.
Alika has, I think, a couple questions that she'll read off.
Yeah, thanks, Casey. Okay, so we did receive one comment from Carter Rubin stating he thanks everyone for this presentation and he's interested to learn what priorities are being funded with the new revenue.
So I actually have that answer later in the slides, if that's okay, if I delay that until we get to that slide.
Perfect. Okay, we got another comment from Sarkis stating, good afternoon. Where can we find the latest draft STIP fund estimates?
We would be happy to share that. One of the items, we just updated the numbers recently, and then we can share that with CTC staff, and then we can share that with everybody. The final fund estimate numbers would be included as part of the CTC meeting materials that are typically released, I think, about a week and a half before the upcoming meeting. So that's where we know the final numbers will be available, but we can definitely share what's available at this point in time.
Great, thank you, Keith.
Thank
So
you.
it looks like those are all the questions we've received. We do have one hand raised. Patricia, you should be able to unmute now.
Okay, can you hear me, Keith?
Yes.
All right, super. Okay, apologize if I get a little ADD sometimes and I may ask things that somebody already asked or you already addressed, but my first question is about the impact of the change in the PTA portion of the fund estimate. Because, oh, let me get my microphone in place. The question is, does it affect the overall magnitude of the estimate? Because I was thinking the estimate was based on the incremental excise tax and wouldn't really be changed by the PTA. So I'm just kind of curious how all those things work together. And I have like 2 more questions, so please don't drop me off yet.
No, that sounds good. So when it comes to the STIP specifically, there are 2 funding sources. There is the incremental excise gas tax, and that's the primary source. But what also for the fund for the STIP, we also have the opportunity to get the PTA funds. As one of the slides that was shared, over the last couple fund estimate cycles, PTA has been fully committed, but given the increase in available revenues, PTA is now available for the STIP. So that's where this cycle we're able to identify that available PTA funds for the STIP. Now, part of the caveat is always those commitments may go up or down. That will impact how much PTA funds would be available. In this case here, since the commitments as part of this decision or the enacted legislation to provide 190 million for to help support transit operators, that 100 million is now a new commitment. So that just means less PTA that would then be available for the fund estimate. But just to clarify, there's 2 funding sources. You've got PTA funds, and then you've got the primary source being the SHA, which is the incremental excise tax.
Okay, so this really, saying that there's more commitments on PTA, that really does say there's less STIP available.
Yes.
Okay, so who am I mad at? Is it like somebody who's super, super important and I should not admit I'm mad at them?
Well, I will freely say, I mean, knowing that the public transportation account is intended to fund both the STIP as well as our transit operations. So knowing that the funding is going to support transit operations and knowing that that is part of our overall transportation needs, to say, don't know that we'd say we're mad at, but that is part of the negotiations as part of the administration and the governor and the legislature. Anything
So
that's
when
approved
you
in the
say
budget is approved
transit
by that.
operations, are you
Mhm.
talking about STA?
Yeah.
Okay,
These are going to- yes.
I'm not mad about that.
I-
That's excellent. That's good, tasty money.
I thought it was kind of a joke when you said, who should I be mad at? The funding is eventually going down there, but we can definitely share information related to how the funding is going to be going.
That's great. That's great. Thank you very much. Okay, now can I still ask another couple questions?
Sure. Only if Alika says so.
Of course, go ahead, Patricia.
Thank you, Alika. Okay, I know that one of the pressures, the downward pressures on the fund estimate has been the late fees. And I'm kind of curious, are we getting close to being done with those, or are more GO bonds getting floated and this is just going to be a never ending thing?
We can say that well, not necessarily a never ending thing, but there's always the potential for more bonds in the future, which then means more debt service. So we can expect, at least in the short term, that demand or that need will continue. So as those late fees come in to pay for debt service, the incremental excise tax would go to backfill that first. And then that as late fees may go up, then that just means more of the excise tax or incremental excise tax would be used to backfill it. So that is a continued pressure. To forecast out what bonds may happen in the future, I don't have a great crystal ball there, but we do know, at least for the short term or and through the midterm, that debt service will still be needed.
Okay, yeah, somebody showed a beautiful chart that explained how that worked, and that would be a crystal ball, but it's I think it's a crystal ball that takes a lot of work to create. So got that. Okay, one last question. The estimate to me looks like there's a bunch of money in it. And I was wondering, it just seems like the estimates from year to year are still kind of going up and down a little bit. Is it going to stay like this, or are they going to go up and down some more? I'm just kind of curious, is there going to ever be a time when they kind of are going along evenly, and how much money will that be?
So a crystal ball. We know fuel consumption is declining. As Matt and Garrett both commented on during their presentation. The inflationary increase we do see when it comes to excise taxes as a result of SB1, that inflationary increase is higher than the decrease in consumption. So that's helping, I'll say helping us to be able to provide maximum available funding. But that decline in consumption is going to continue to get sharper. So we do see, or we're forecasting as we get to the next cycle. So we're currently working on the 24. As we get to the 2026 cycle, we are expecting that decline, the decline in consumption to start outpacing that increase. So we should start to see a decline from excise tax revenue. I know that there's discussions about a road charge and other replacement opportunities when it comes to transportation related revenue. And we don't know what the federal revenue may be after the IIJA expires. So there's always that potential that there could be something to backfill that could provide additional. But if we're just focused on the fuel excise tax, we see it going down, and we could see that we are forecasting probably the next cycle, the fund estimate cycle, we should see that decline. So
All right.
maybe a naysayer.
I think I know I have to totally agree with that. We had an electric car and a Prius, and after the second catalytic converter got stolen from our Prius, my husband said, I'm going to take that to the shop, get it replaced, and then get rid of it. I am never buying a gas car again. That's it. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Okay, so we did receive a comment from Rachel Marconi stating, Patricia and everyone, it is my understanding some of the transit fiscal cliff dollars will be flowing through RTPAs equaling about 4.4 billion. TIRCP formula by population, CSB 125, plus 1.1 billion zero emissions transit capital program funds will flow through STA formula. Let me know if anyone else knows anything else.
That's why Rachel's a superstar. Yes, agree.
And then we did receive one additional comment from David Chan. Casey, I believe this is to you. Will this PowerPoint presentation be made available?
Yes, I'll make sure that it's posted after our workshop. And I just wanted to quickly address Sarkis's question from earlier, asking if the tables, the updated fund estimate and tables will be available somewhere online. I am going to ask if the RTPA group can distribute it out so that you have the most updated version. Mind you, it'll remain the revised draft, and the final will come forward in August at the August Commission meeting.
Great. I don't see any other questions at this time or hands raised.
All right. Thank you very much. Both myself, Garrett, and Matt will stick around to the end. Casey, if there's anything needed, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Keith, Matt, and Garrett. Okay, so we are going to move on to the draft 2024 STIP guidelines. We're also going to talk about program capacity and the updated county and interregional shares, which I just covered. So I'm going to skip this. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the revised draft 2024 STIP fund estimate. And this was already shared by the Caltrans Division of Budgets team, but I wanted to put my own words into this screen here. So as they mentioned previously, the fund estimate that was presented at the June meeting had more PTA available than what is available in this current slide. It was reduced by 190 million, which impacts the programming capacity for the STIP, for the 2024 STIP. In addition to that, it affected the shares. So we can see here, I'm going to call this fiscal year 23-24 the base year. So the base year, which is our current fiscal year, we are negative about 44 million. We're hoping that that'll be corrected with projects that are delayed and possibly lapsing and time extensions and whatnot. So year one, which is fiscal year 24-25, we have 97 million. This is not a lot of money to program new projects. We're anticipating that these funds here or these shares here will end up going to existing projects that will require cost increases. And then year 2 and year 3, we can see here that there is some programming capacity available. It's not a lot of money here in years 2 and 3. So we do anticipate being able to program new projects in years 2 and 3. We're seeing a lot of the projects that are being programmed, they're getting larger. So I'm not sure if we have room to program larger projects, but there is some room available in this year. And then as usual, the last 2 years of the STIP, because there are no commitments from this prior STIP, there is available capacity here for a lot of those newer projects. Now, there was a question earlier about what projects are priority when programming projects into the 2024 STIP. And I do have a list of those that go in order. So our first main goal is to program projects that are existing in the STIP that have cost increases. The next priority projects are going to be those projects that were successful in the SB1 Cycle 3 competitive programs. Next, our priority is to program projects that were previously programmed in the STIP that are construction ready. So, and then one thing I actually want to add that I missed earlier regarding the PTA is because we are limited on PTA funding, as usual, we want to make sure that any of these projects that are programmed for transit or rail, that they are consistent with Article 19 and remain state or federally eligible. So before I proceed to the next screen, does anyone have any questions for me?
We could pause for a second, but I'm not seeing any questions or hands raised at this time.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So this is an important screen. This is the revised draft summary of your target and shares. So these shares they're different from what was provided at the June commission meeting. And the reason these shares are different is because after the June commission meeting, we go ahead and do a reconciliation and make sure everything was captured as final items through June. In addition to that, the reduction in PTA also affected the formula distribution. So what we're looking at right now is the revised draft. I feel pretty confident that this is going to be our final numbers, but you never know if there's going to be changes between now and August. So we can see here that this provides the base, our total, and our maximum. And these shares, they were distributed based off of the 2020 census and the 2023 centerline highway miles. And the ratio for that is about 75% of population and 25% of the centerline highway miles. Let's see here, just going through my notes. So when we calculate the shares, we always start with the beginning balance. So in this case, we started with the 2022 STIP and the 2022 Orange Book. And we capture all actions through the ending balance, which is what I mentioned, the June 2023 commission meeting. And that includes any lapses, advances, and unprogrammed share balances. Now the 2024 STIP, we can see here that we have a couple of fiscal years referenced in the share distribution. So we have our base, which is also called the minimum, which is fiscal year 27-28. The minimum closes a county share period, and 28-29 starts a new share period. And then we have the maximum, which goes through fiscal year 31-32. Now, one thing I want to mention is just about the maximum. A lot of regions tend to program projects to their maximum. And the only way that we're able to program projects to the max is when another region programs less. So if they're not programming to their target or their base and there's available shares or capacity, that leaves room for other projects to be programmed to the max. So that part can be a little bit confusing, the share balance, but our main goal is to program projects within the fund estimate, so the programming capacity that we have available. And I'm going to give you just a quick example of what that means. So you can see here on the screen, and if you can see my mouse, this is our total target. So the total target goes down, right? And it goes to this column here. This is our total target. This amount here, the 1.674, this is what's in the fund estimate. So this is that's why it's our target. This is the program capacity we have for the 2024 STIP. Now, if everyone programmed their max, you can see if we go down here, that would be 6.6 billion. We have to stay between this one. We have to stay within this 1.6. So I just want to emphasize that. So you are welcome to program to your max. It's just not a guarantee that. I'm sorry, propose a program to the max, but it's not a guarantee that those projects will be able to program. And I see Carl has a question.
Carl, go ahead.
Thank you, Alika, and thank you, Casey, for a great presentation. I noticed that the targets have gone down probably kind of a significant amount across a few counties since the draft June item. Can you provide a justification or rationale as to what changed over the last few weeks?
Yeah. So what affected the change? A couple things. So a couple of June actions that occurred. So remember that what's presented at the June commission meeting is draft. So June actions have not been finalized. So I would say it's June actions that have occurred, not all actions, but there were some changes to some of those actions, including, I'll give you an example. There is 2 regions who were sharing, who were sharing, they did like a share split, and those shares ended up going to one region and not the other. And because of that, that affected the share distribution. So just little things like that, plus the reduction in PTA caused the entire share distribution to change. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks, Casey. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Okay, so any other questions before I proceed to the next slide?
I'm not seeing any other questions or hands raised at this time.
Okay, thanks, Alika. Okay, so this slide, it's kind of getting into the weeds, but I think it's really important to share with everyone. This is your PPM for the 2024 STIP. You can see that I have 2 boxes highlighted here. All counties did not fit on the screen, so I had to split it, and now they're side by side. So what this is showing you is this is your 5% PPM that is available to each region for the 2024 STIP. I mentioned in the previous slide that the 27-28, the target, which is 27-28, closes a share period. And not only does it close a share period, causing a new share period here to be created fiscal year 28-29, I also needed to capture new capacity for fiscal year 24-25 through to 27-28, because those fiscal years were connected to other STIPs because of the share balance. So the share balance was overlapped in multiple STIPs. So what I mean by that is we can see here the 2020 STIP had a share balance for fiscal year 24-25, which in the 2022 STIP, you can see 24-25 fiscal year was still in the 22 STIP and still received the county share distribution and so forth. So the reason I wanted to highlight this section here is because what you see here, the 3,169,000, and I'm going to use Alameda on my example for my example on the next page. This isn't in addition to the 743. We have to take into account programmed amounts for PPM that were captured in the 2022 STIP and identify the difference. And then that is your available share for PPM for this particular column. So I'm going to get into details and then I'll go ahead and answer any questions that you have. Let's see. Okay. So this is the 2022 Orange Book. Okay, so this is the beginning balance, the 2022 Orange Book. Absolutely no actions in 22-23 fiscal year. So we can see here that Alameda, they programmed 1,668,000 in total PPM for fiscal years 24-25, 25-26, and 26-27. Now, if we look at your PPM, now this screen here is exactly what I shared over here. It's just showing Alameda zoomed in, okay? So we can see here that they have 3,169,000 available. So if we take 3,169,000 minus what was already programmed, which was 1,668 for Alameda, the new PPM for this fiscal year only is 1,501,000 plus the 743 for this new share period. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that this example is clear, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have on this section.
I'm not seeing any hands raised or
Good.
questions coming in.
Great. Okay. Okay, so now, oh, okay.
Sorry, Casey, we did receive one question. This is asking, where did the 11668 come from? The 1668.
Good question. So if we add 2022 STIP. Yeah, so it's the 2022 STIP. So if you go to the 2022 Orange Book and look at your county and identify the PPM that you have programmed in fiscal year 24-25 through 27-28, that's the number that you want to look at. So the 1668 in this example are these boxes here. So 172, 176, 179, 394, 747. I added all of those up together to get the 1.668. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We have one other question that came in from Nick Smith asking, did the county shares shown in the previous slide include lapsed funds for applicable counties?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so next we're going to dive into guidelines. I actually don't have too much to talk about with guidelines. There hasn't been any changes. So we held a workshop on May 17th, and those draft guidelines didn't really change compared to what was presented at the June commission meeting. Any changes that did occur between the May workshop and June, they were very minimal changes, really just wordsmithing. So today I'm mainly just going to cover two sections, the community engagement section and the fact sheet section. Again, nothing has changed. I just want to emphasize the two new sections that are being added to the guidelines. So I am going to read this off, and then I'm going to give everyone a minute to read it. And from there, I'll go ahead and do my little spiel and answer any questions that you guys have. So section 23, community engagement. Again, this is a new section to the 2024 STIP, draft 2024 STIP guidelines. And it says that the commission requires the development of each RTIP and the ITIP to be informed by a robust community engagement process. All agencies shall include documentation of the community community engagement activities undertaken to develop the program of projects proposed in each RTIP and the ITIP. This discussion can include community engagement conducted during the Regional Transportation Plan or the California Transportation Plan development, and community engagement conducted during, am I repeating myself? And community engagement conducted during individual project planning or community engagement conducted for the RTIP and the ITIP itself. Agencies should describe how community feedback was acknowledged and incorporated into each RTIP and ITIP. The description should clearly demonstrate the linkage between the engagement and the scope of the proposed projects. The documentation should include a summary of the benefits the RTIP or ITIP will have on the community and any potential negative community impacts. If negative community impacts have been identified, describe how these impacts are being mitigated and a description of how the mitigation strategy was developed in coordination with the impacted communities. Okay, so again, this is a new section that is being added to the draft STIP guidelines. And I'm going to give everyone about a minute to just read it themselves, and then we'll go from there.
They have.
Okay, so I think it's been about a minute. So the reason, oops, I'm echoing. Okay, thanks. Okay, so the reason I wanted to emphasize or bring up the community engagement section again is because I want to emphasize the importance of community engagement, especially when it comes to the RTIPs and the ITIP. So the whole purpose behind this section is just to require that each RTIP and the ITIP document the community engagement activities that are conducted during a project's planning phase, including how any potential negative community impacts will be mitigated. So this will be a new section that'll need to be added to the RTIP template as well. And we were fortunate enough to have some of the Equity Advisory Committee members assist us in the creation of this language. So I'm looking forward to the additions in your RTIPs and happy to answer any questions that you may have on this section.
We've received one question so far. This is from Terry King asking if the FE doesn't show enough shares in fiscal year 28-29 to program a project, but does in max share through fiscal year 31-32, can a project be programmed if the 2024 STIP period ends in fiscal year 28-29?
So I'm actually going to read that myself, if you can just give me one moment. So if you have, so it's really based on program capacity, and not necessarily the shares. So I'll give you an example. The 2024 STIP fund estimate shows that we have about 1.6 billion in funding to support the proposed projects. If the commission, if the RTIPs and the ITIP that are received go beyond the 1.6 billion, then at that point, the commission will need to identify priority projects based on the priorities that I identified, and some projects may not end up being programmed.
That's really.
Are you, just to clarify, are you asking if you can advance projects? If you have a project that's currently programmed, if you can advance it?
I haven't received any clarification yet from Terry.
Okay, I think the other thing that I can mention is, there is,
Oh, we are paying off.
oh, yeah, hold on, let me read it. Oh, we are paying off prior advances. Okay, so it depends on, so if you have a negative share balance, it really just depends on,
They cannot program until they fully.
well, right, no, I'm stumbling here and I'm just trying to get my thoughts together. So if you have a negative share balance, unfortunately, you're not able to program any new projects into the STIP until that share balance is returned and is in the positive, but you are able to program PPM. PPM will still draw down your shares, but you cannot program any new projects. So I hope I answered your question.
Okay, so I'll go to the next question. This is from Ben asking, you mentioned the STIP template will include this community engagement section. That's great. Do you have any idea of when the template will be sent out?
So the template is actually was created by the RTPA group. I'm not sure if Rich is on the line, and I think Carl is on the line also. But it's my understanding that the RTPA group is managed, or the template is managed by the RTPA group, and they will work on revising it. And then I'm more than happy to review it once it's finalized to make sure everything appears in the proper order and everything was included.
I see Carl has his hand raised. Carl, go ahead.
Thanks, Alika. I'll defer to Rich if he's online. Do you see him, Alika, or no?
I did not see him earlier unless I missed him.
Okay, I'll just say that we'll add this to the next RTPA meeting agenda for discussion to figure out what components need to be updated, added, or removed. So look forward to that in August.
Thanks, Carl.
Okay, so we have next question asking, is there a way to see the details behind each county STIP share? I'm interested in seeing if savings and lapses were fully accounted for.
So, so the actual distribution is not available to share, but my recommendation is that you go back to the previous Orange Book. So each STIP cycle or each Orange Book shows the beginning balance and the end balance. So as you look at past Orange Books, you'll be able to see what your beginning and end balance is. There is also, if you go to the draft tables that were provided at the June commission meeting, this doesn't necessarily show like the actual shared distribution, but it does provide you with beginning balances, ending balances. It also includes any projects that were advanced or lapses. So between all of that information, you should be able to track beginning balance, actions, lapses, and ending balance. And that's what we use to identify your shares.
Okay, we have one final comment from Patricia Chen stating, thank you for this community engagement language. Metro appreciates that community engagement for individual projects is considered as we do extensive engagement and equity analysis to choose projects for our measures and long-range transportation plan that feed into the RTP for the SCAG region. We may not duplicate the engagement to facilitate the programming of individual fund sources for each project. Thank you very much for the flexible language which assures the public that good engagement and planning takes place.
Thank you, Patricia.
And I'm not seeing any other, there's one more question that came in from Jose asking, I'm new here. Is it typical to mitigate projects at time of programming prior to completion of the environmental document?
Okay, Jose Luis. So really good question. Let's see if I can answer this. So I would say it's more so, let's see here. I would say it's more so, yes, the answer is yes. You can definitely mitigate prior to environmental. I would say the biggest item here with community engagement is just making sure that the community is engaged. So we want to make sure that projects aren't being created without any sort of community engagement. And if there is, a negative impact, and that a negative impact could be anything. And just making sure that the community is familiar with what's going on, that they've had a say in the creation of the project or the development of the project. We want to make sure that the community is just engaged. They know what's going on, and they've had a say in the proposed projects.
Great. I am not seeing any other questions at this time.
Sorry, I'm just looking at the comments here.
Rachel's question?
Yeah, I did. It looks like we have a hand raised, Dawn Batiste. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, thinking on Jose Luis's question, would it be appropriate in the document then, if you are really just programming an environmental document for the first time, to, simply outline what was, anticipated in the project study report, and then discuss the more robust outreach and communication that you'll do with the community during that environmental process? Because I'm kind of agreeing with him that, it's really not a mitigation in terms of, you haven't identified even, an alternative. You haven't, narrowed it down too much other than through your project study report. But I think it would be fair to have the agency, describe, what was done, if anything, during their initial scoping to determine the purpose and need, and then maybe just discuss further the plans for outreach during the environmental.
Yes, I think you hit it spot on, Dawn. Thank you. I agree with that.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions or hands raised.
Okay. So I will go ahead and move on to the next item, which is the fact sheet. So section 50 of the draft guidelines, draft 2024 STIP guidelines. So again, there's no change here to the fact sheet section of the guidelines. What's presented on the screen is what was presented to you at the May 17th, 2023 workshop, and at the draft, the June commission meeting, the draft guidelines presented at the June commission meeting. But the reason I have it here is, again, I want to emphasize the importance of the fact sheet. So the fact sheet is new, and the whole purpose behind the fact sheet is for the regions to share the priorities that are going on within that region. And so I think one of the things that's really important to emphasize is that these projects don't necessarily have to be STIP projects. I mean, we want them to be somewhat related, especially if you're using these other priority projects to mitigate a potential VMT increasing project. But we want the fact sheet to be so so informative, so engaged with what is going on with your region that that people can go to the website and look at these fact sheets and see a project and what is going on. I do want to add too that this the commissioners are looking at projects that are increasing VMT, capacity increasing projects. And while I understand those projects are eligible in the STIP, I'm just asking that everyone is prepared, that if you have a highway project that's capacity increasing, that you're prepared to talk about it, including in your RTIP, in the fact sheet, and when the STIP is adopted. And again, I feel like the fact sheet is going to be your key place to identify, this potentially increasing VMT increasing project. It's doing that, but the region is doing all these other priority projects that like multi-corridors, multimodal, I should say, sorry, projects that are going to mitigate that VMT increasing project. So I just wanted to throw that out there and just give you guys the heads up on that. And that, again, if you are proposing anything like that, just make sure that it's included in your RTIP, but, especially in your fact sheet, because that's going to be, a public document as well. And with that, I'm going to open it up for any questions.
We've received one question from Carter asking, will proponents of VMT increasing projects be required to identify VMT impact estimates via NCST or Caltrans calculator if applicable?
I'm honestly not sure what that calculator is, but I will say that the guidelines do say that the guidelines mention that there's a threshold, and I can't remember off the top of my head, and I should, but I believe it's if you have a project, a total project cost or a construction phase that's over a certain dollar amount, you're required to provide project level benefits. So that's where this information would be highlighted. Otherwise, if it's below that threshold, then the metrics would end up being from a regional perspective and not necessarily project specific. Did that answer your question, Carter? Okay, good. Okay, great.
Okay, so we received another question. This one is from Jillian asking, for capacity projects we already programmed in the 2022 STIP that will continue in 2024 STIP, will they be scrutinized, or do you think it will be more focused on new projects being added in 2024 STIP?
Jillian, that's actually a really good question. So I think it's anything within the 2024 STIP. So it doesn't matter if it's existing or not. When the 2024 STIP is adopted, what's seen is everything in that STIP, not old projects or previous projects. So I would emphasize that if you have an existing project that's in the STIP that is a VMT increasing, that you highlight that in your RTIP and in the fact sheet.
Okay, she also had a second question asking, with regards to Carter's question, VMT mitigation is relatively new when you consider the project delivery lifespan. Many projects we're just getting around to programming for construction funding are not subject to VMT requirements.
I'm going to pass this question over to Teresa.
Yes, you are correct, Jillian, but we need to be able to make sure that we're clear on that. Prior to, I think it's 2018 or so, projects that started the environmental phase prior to that are not subject to VMT. We just need to be prepared to respond to that question if the question is to arise, because that's all we're saying. Okay.
Okay, I am not seeing any other questions or hands raised at this time.
Okay, thanks, Alika. Okay, so I'm gonna proceed to the next screen. Okay, so this is our timeline for the 2024 STIP. These are just next action items. I didn't include everything. So the next item that'll be approaching is the adoption of the 2024 STIP guidelines, in addition to the adoption of the 2024 STIP fund estimate. That'll occur at the August commission meeting in San Diego on August 16th and 17th next month. Next, Caltrans will identify their state highway needs, and that is released September 15th. Then Caltrans releases their draft ITIP, which occurs on October 15th. We will be holding an ITIP hearing in the South on November 1st. It'll be in Riverside. The North ITIP hearing will be here in Sacramento on November 8th. Following that, we have our tips and the final ITIP due to the commission by December 15th. And that's a hard date. And then next we have the STIP hearing in the North and the South. That'll be on the 25th, 5th, and the 1st. So the North on the 25th, the South on February 1st. And then finally, the commission will adopt the 2024 STIP at the March 2024 commission meeting. Are there any questions on the timeline?
I am not seeing any questions or hands raised.
Okay, thanks, Alika. Okay, so that concludes my items. I'm happy to answer any other questions that that any of you have. We're just going to wait here a minute to see if anyone's typing, or if anyone has any questions that may pop up here in just a few minutes.
I am not seeing any questions coming in or hands raised.
Okay. Thanks, Alika. So here's my information. Again, my name is Casey Ruggiero. I work for the California Transportation Commission. If you have any questions for me after this workshop or at any time regarding the STIP program, feel free to email me or call me. This is my work cell phone number. I'm always available and happy to help. As I usually tell everyone, there's never a dumb question, so please just feel free to call me, and I'm always happy to help where I can. And oops, well, that concludes our presentation. So thank you everyone for attending today. And again, I'm available if you have any questions. Thank you.